Hello. I think we're live. We are. Yes, there's other people on here. How's it going, everybody? Um, Today we are discussing the Japanese lover, Isabel Allende, and I think I have to be very honest at the very beginning. It wasn't my favorite book. I really liked a lot about it, but it was I don't know. It was a book that sort of made me. I had very conflicting thoughts about it, and reading everyone's comments, it sort of seemed like a lot of people loved it, and a lot of people also had sort of conflicting feelings about it. And it's very hard for me to, ever say anything wrong about anyone's work, their writing, because I think anyone who can write a book is a genius and should be, applauded ad infinitum. But it was a strange read for me, and I also made the mistake of reading it first on my Kindle, and I don't know whether that also partially made it harder for me to get into. But I loved so much about the story, and I think I also wonder if not reading it in Spanish maybe changed sort of the style, or changed the the voice of the author a little bit, because I felt like a lot of it was very distant, and I was getting this great story, but like there would be these amazing parts to it, and then she would just gloss over these other moments in the story so quickly and at such a remove that it sort of felt like I wanted to feel what was going on. Like I wanted to know more about the feelings and the emotions of the characters at that point. And sometimes it sort of felt like she just glossed over the story and was like, and then this happened and this happened, and you're like, wait a minute, that's a huge moment. But okay, so we're going to get into some of your questions. One of the main things that a lot of people talked about when in their comments was how few people knew about Japanese internment during the Second World War in the US. And I have to admit, it's not something that I knew of until I moved to California. So probably, around 2010 was probably the first time I had heard of it. And it's amazing because I also, reading up a little bit more about it, there was over 120,000 Japanese interned throughout the States. I think there was something like 10 different camps. There was also over 11,000 Germans and a smaller number of Italian Americans. And actually it also happened in the UK. And it is funny, I mean, a lot of people were so surprised. Some weren't Americans, some were Americans. And it made me think a lot about, history and what we're taught, and how the victors get to frame history in a particular way. And this is why, working on a period drama, especially, it's always really interesting to not take history as absolute. That, the people who write down history give you a version or their version, and you often have to dig much deeper to find out the actual truth and what other people were experiencing at that time, not just the people who had the access to power and the access to tell the stories. So I did find all of that part of this book really, really fascinating and really interesting. And to hear Ichi's story and like the story of what the time was during the internment, I think given that sort of view into life of that is not something I'd ever heard of before. And I guess even though I'd heard of the Japanese internment, I never really thought about what that actually looked like or what it meant. And I think that was one of the beautiful things in the book. A lot of other people talked about as well, about this idea of looking at the aged population and what happens to people who in some ways are considered by society as disposable. And, this whole image of Lark House and who gets to be cared for and what kind of life they're given in their old age. And I thought that was fascinating, and a really interesting look, and a beautiful look at kind of the society and the friendships and everything that's formed in a place like this. Somebody's saying, sadly, anti-Asian attacks are on the rise again. This is very true. And this is something that I know a lot of Asian American actors have been speaking out about of late. I've just seen a few things, and it's really sad, because actually when you think about it, there had been a ban on Japanese immigration into the US in 1924. So no Japanese Americans had lived in Japan before 1924. So they'd been in America for over 20 years and assimilated and had their children there. And then all of a sudden they were just blanketly rounded up and put in these camps. It's really, if you haven't read up more on it, I suggest it's something really interesting to read about and educate yourself about. And I know I was sort of saddened and fascinated when I read more. I suppose, shall we go to some of the questions? I just wolfed down my tea, my dinner. I ordered in, I had some ramen, but it arrived late. So I was shoveling it into my mouth before I had to come on. And so if I have a few little ramen burps, excuse me, I'm also cheers. Okay, so I printed them out this time because usually I'm trying to write them out and I never can read my own writing properly. So this is Saint Scintilla, and she said, I tend to believe that people who usually have no regrets, complicated emotion, painful experience, but very cathartic if you manage, usually have little chance of self-improvement mentally and thus little chance of corrective actions. I would like to point out that I do not mean that one should blame himself or herself for everything that goes wrong. Did you believe that she, Alma, betrayed Ichimi or herself? And there was a second part to this that I didn't print out and I wish I had, but she talked about how later on in the book, Alma talks about getting to sort of be more at ease with her flaws. I think that was the sort of point, and I think that's kind of what Isabel Allende was trying to say. It's that we have a certain amount of set nature, and I believe that it's not that we never have the capability of change or of growth, but that over time sometimes we become more, I suppose, at ease, or we learn to deal with our flaws, or we learn to deal with our quirks slightly better. Do I believe that Alma betrayed Ichimi or herself? Both. I thought this whole story of Alma and Ichimi was really tragic and not quite this gorgeous love story that some people saw. And I was like, why am I looking at this in such a dark way? I think it's so complex, the reasons why Alma felt she couldn't choose Ichimi and she couldn't renounce what the way it sort of was described as these sort of very shallow reasons, this sort of social position and her life of luxury, and that that was the reasoning she was given. But I have to imagine that it goes much deeper than that. I do think obviously the pressures of society can be hugely influential and important, and I think we have to also remember the time that this was set in and how much also Alma was still probably and throughout her whole life suffered from the tragedy of her early life. I mean, I don't think you come out of something like losing your entire family and then having to survive what that means. I mean, and in a way I felt that this is where my I guess frustration with this book was sometimes I wanted Isabel Allende to delve deeper into the psychology and the emotional life of her characters, and sometimes things were just sort of explained away in a very straightforward and simple way. It was like, well, she obviously just didn't want to give up this, so she made her choice and that was it. But it's like, anyone who's had to survive, they are constantly going to be in survival mode. And for Alma, I don't think she was capable. I don't think she had the emotional health, I suppose, to understand that, you know, love and the nurture of love, and that would be much more satisfying than this sort of physical survival, because that's what she has only experienced. Her family lost their lives due to the Holocaust. They lost everything. So for her, that desperation and that fear, I guess, of losing everything was so strong that it couldn't, you know, the fear was bigger than love, I guess. And when you have so much fear like that, you can't fully experience love, because you're incapable, because there's so much of you that's still so scared. And I thought that was not really delved into enough. That it was sort of like, well, she lost her family and then she came to San Francisco and the Valescos took her in and, you know, life was great. You know, and it's like, no, those traumas don't ever leave. And especially to have witnessed Ichimi and his family be sent away in very sort of, you know, similar circumstances to what happened to her family and people around her, and for her to still reject him in a way, I think that's more a product of her trauma. And in a way, you know, there's part of me was like, oh, she just didn't have the courage, but I don't think you can judge her in that way because of what happened to her. I don't think that she was capable of not being in survival mode. I hope that sort of answers some of that. People are saying hi. I'm going to read some of these. One of the best things about the book was the look at the internment camps from the internees' perspective. I agree. My great uncle escaped from Austria to the UK in 1938, but then was sent to Australia to an internment camp for the duration of the war by the UK government. Came back and moved to California. He's now 100 years old. That's Purple Haley's. Wow, that's amazing. Actually, because I was reading that what the UK government did was, even a lot of Jewish refugees who first came to the UK, they had tribunals set up. And so anyone who was German, Austrian, even Italian, they sort of rounded them up. They were forced to go to these tribunals, and then they graded them from different categories. It was like, if you were C, you were just put on a list, but if you were B or A, you were sent to camps. And what they would do is they would put them on ships, and they would either send them to Australia, Canada, or some of these colonies that were part of the British Empire at the time, which is wild. I mean, when you think about it, and something that I, again, didn't know until I actually started doing research for this. And was like, I need to read way more on this, but that's fascinating. And I can't believe he's 100. That's amazing. Okay, let's go for another question. Let me see, which one was this? Oh, they're not in the right order. Okay, well, until I figure out what that one is. Excuse me, sorry. We'll go. This is Kaylee Marley. Really enjoyed the book. Took me a little while to get into it. Honestly, it's not one of my all-time favorites. Sometimes I missed a little depth, but that makes me even more curious about your take on this book. I immediately talked to Irina. Something about her really kept the story going, and I was so upset when she told her story to Seth. I love how Isabel captures the rules and ways of living in those times and added things that we in the Netherlands do not necessarily learn in our history, like the way the Japanese people were treated after Pearl Harbor. The thing that struck me the most was that Alma and Nathaniel were not as open with each other as I expected from them being such good, close friends. It wasn't until Nathaniel's death that they were completely open about their relationship. I wonder why they could not have done this before, as life could have been so different, especially for Nathaniel, and I feel as though he could trust Alma. Why do you think they never confided in each other and were not as open, or at least as I would have expected them to be? Thanks, Kaylee. I really liked that comment because one thing I loved about the relationship between Alma and Nathaniel was how complex it was and confusing. And, you know, and I like when things are unexpected and life is confusing and people don't always act the way you think they're going to act. And sometimes we want things to be very linear and straightforward, and so it's easy for us to understand, but human beings are so complex. And that was one of the things, you know, their relationship, even though it was so tragic as well. I just think it's tragic. I think it was so tragic that two people felt that they couldn't be their authentic selves, and so they had to live this lie, but within it at least they had found friendship. And I think that was one of the biggest things about their relationship that I really enjoyed, was that they had a lot of... There's one thing I am going to say, that was it 271? I hope I it was almost like, this is one of the things that really annoyed me. I'm sorry. But it was like, if they occasionally made love, it was by coincidence and always with too much alcohol in their veins. How do you make love by coincidence? Just was like, huh? But I thought with them, you know, it's amazing that they couldn't, you know, even in their friendship, they still couldn't. Well, they'd sort of told each other to keep secrets. And I suppose Alma had told Nathaniel she hadn't, and the fact that she didn't suspect he was gay also is very questionable. I mean, it wasn't that outlandish. And the fact that there was no hints and there was no indication, it makes me wonder how close they really were, if they spent that much time together. And the fact that she sort of said to him, you know, you should have as many dalliances as you want, I just don't want to be humiliated. I mean, I wonder, I sort of don't really believe that they never were more honest, even when they would get drunk. I mean, they were cousins and they weren't in love, and they would get drunk enough to have sex, but they wouldn't get drunk enough to be, I don't know, to tell each other stuff. Maybe I'm just a mousy drunk. I mean, I can't stop telling people stuff whenever I get drunk. But I found that kind of strange. I did love this one passage though, and this is when Alma loses Ichi's child. And what I didn't love was that it's just sort of glossed over. I mean, it starts off the child never born, this chapter with Alma was so caught up in her pregnancy that her anger at having renounced her love for Ichimi became a bearable inconvenience, like having a stone in her shoe. I just find that a very surface assessment. And maybe I'm missing something in the Spanish translation, and maybe in Spanish it gives you so much more of feeling or emotion, but that felt so, I don't know, so cold to me, which I would never expect from a Latin writer. I mean, the heat and passion and all of that is what I expect from people in Latin countries, and it was very strange. But then, 3 or 4 pages later, what I loved is with Nathaniel, it's like he wept, thinking he was doing so for the dead child and for Alma, but in fact he was doing so for himself, for his constrained, conventional life, the weight of the responsibilities he could never free himself from, the loneliness that had oppressed him since birth, the love he longed for but would never know, the marked cards he had been dealt, all the underhanded tricks destiny had played on him. And that, to me, was so revelatory and gave me so much of his, told me so much about his character, that this complete sadness, and maybe in some ways that's what connected Alma and Nathaniel together so much, was that they both had this deep, deep rooted sadness and felt that they were somehow unworthy of a better relationship or unworthy of more love or something like that. But yeah, it's for them to have waited till his deathbed for him to finally be honest, and for her to finally be honest. Maybe it's just the tragedy of people not feeling like that they're worthy of being seen, or that they can allow themselves to be seen. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, we'll move on. There's a lot to get through, and I'm talking a lot. So this is quite similar, but Erin Manderer, a persistent theme in this book is the inability of the characters, by circumstances or by choice or both, to live as their authentic selves. What do you think was the ultimate message the author was trying to convey about that? Well, I think that it's a very... I like that this is one of the themes. I think that this is something that, millions of people struggle with, and why so many people are unhappy in their lives is because it's really, really difficult to be authentic, and the pressures of so many different things in our lives, thwart us from doing that. Either you're not welcome in society because you're not the right race or sex, or you aren't, the right sexuality, all of these things, or even your family, that your family want you to do something and you feel the weight of the responsibility to them, or, there are so many things why we don't be more of ourselves. I think everyone struggles with that on varying different degrees, and I know in my life in various different times there's been varying different degrees of that for me, and it only makes you unhappy. and I think that you see that fear, I think, is a big one as well, and there's so much fear in this book. Irina has so much fear and has been so much trauma, that she's so scared to be herself, because the last time she sort of hoped and dreamed for something amazing was when she went to her mother, and then her life was completely ruined. I think there are so many, there's so many people in this world who struggle with that, and maybe that's what the author was trying to explore. I'm not sure there was a conclusion in the book. I didn't quite feel like there was necessarily a point of view towards the end about what that was. But let's move on. Now this one, let me see. Lots of people, well, actually, I'm going to go. This is Erin Lambert. Although a subtle theme, can we talk about the strength of women? It weaves throughout the novel. It's something that stood out to me with the women in this story. Alma, Irina, Hideko, all persevere through hardships, but through their hardships strive to make things better for people around them. Although a story of love and friendship, this stood out to me. This is one of the things that I really liked about the book. I would put in Kathy in there as well. Also probably Megumi. I loved her character. I wanted to know more about her because she just didn't give up. She was like, I'm having that guy and I don't care about the social implications of it, or I don't care who's going to care about it. But Hideko as well, you see what a force she was for the family. But I don't know that I necessarily... Alma was an interesting character. I don't know that I'd necessarily call her... I thought she was quite a flawed character, and I don't ever know that she fully reconciled. I think she was in a lot of pain towards her life. I think somebody asked about it later. I think it's in another question, where she renounces everything and moves to Lark House almost as a penance. And I think it's because she could still never forgive herself for not giving herself the opportunity to live a happier life. But they're all survivors, and Alma ultimately is a survivor. And I need to stop. I go through phases of like judging her and then being like, but she really went through a hard time. Then I judge her, and then but I do think it saddened me that she never really got to really live like openly as she wanted to. Somebody told me to read about the American Revolution. I have read a bit about the American Revolution. That's not what we're talking about here. Let's see. But yes, I thought Irina was such a survivor and such a strong character. I know more about Irina, not just in what she was doing, but like, this is also one of the things, and somebody else mentioned, no, don't tell me we're going to get connection problems again. Blah. Somebody else talked about this in the comments as well, and it's the relationship between Irina and Seth. And I was I never felt, or I never got the sense of what Irina saw in Seth, other than stability. And he was sort of like, I'm going to tell you that you're going to be with me, and I wanted to marry you, and you're going to move into my apartment, and do you want to see the apartment first, because it's a really nice apartment. And it was just like, it didn't feel like an organic, and I don't know, it didn't feel like, it just felt very weird. It felt like he had just decided that he was gonna have her and he was just gonna wear her down and stick around. Like, I wanted to hear more about their sort of friendship, and that he was a safe place, and that he, I don't know, it was a very weirdly explained relationship. I feel like the insights we were given to it, I'm just going to talk about this next, that's what I'm talking about. Where is the 2 and 3, 2 and 2? Yeah, he was like, I know he's joking, But what are you waiting for me? What are you waiting for to love me in return? I know, I promise you, you know I've loved you for 3 years. What are you waiting for to love me in return? Maybe she doesn't love you. But watch out, because I can always find another girl from Moldova. There are hundreds of them willing to marry in order to get an American visa. It's a joke. Seriously, you'd be happy with me, Irina. I'm a good guy, totally harmless. It's not exactly like... It's like if you have to reason with somebody why they should love you, I feel like maybe they just don't love you. And it's like maybe she doesn't have to learn to love you. Right, yeah, and then he said, let me guess, trafficking in endangered species of exotic animals. I don't care. Come and see my apartment, then decide. Like, oh, it's a really nice apartment. Okay then, all right. Now I'll try and love you. It's just like, I just found that so strange. And then there's like, yeah, I didn't get their relationship really. You know, I felt that they were more, it was more this kind of like conduit through Alma, that Alma was the thing that connected them. But really, without Alma, would they have so much? Yeah, it was strange. I've kind of gone off the subject of what I was going to say. Carla Faria. Alma lived a secret affair with Ichimi for 55 years. She did not have the courage to face her prejudice and the society to live her love fully. She admitted to herself that her most deeply rooted prejudice was social. She never overcame the obstacle of giving up the luxury life to live with Ichimi, who was Japanese after all. I'm curious that a Jewish woman who suffered so much prejudice also has racial prejudice. Or it's curious, isn't it? For all these reasons, Alma lived on appearances for 55 years. It's interesting that she shows no regret at all for the choices of the past. Nathaniel also lacked the courage to assume his homosexuality. The cousins had a double life, to look something that is not for society and to be its hidden essence. We are social roles. But is living acting all the time? What is Alma Belesco's true soul? I love the choice of this book. I love Isabel Allende. Thank you for the book club. It's Carla Ferraria. I think we have to also, with Nathaniel and hiding the fact that he was gay, we still have to look at it in the context of the time and how difficult it would have been to come out at that time, given his career, but given his profession, he would have lost everything, probably his family. So I think nowadays it's sort of easy to sort of go, he didn't have the courage, but you're literally giving up everything. You know, I'm not sure if for Alma it would have been the same thing. I mean, was an interracial marriage in those days as sort of socially unacceptable as homosexuality? I don't know. But I do think it's easy for us to maybe judge with a modern eye. But I do think their relationship was definitely a safe haven for each other. But I think it was quite beautiful how much they cared for each other towards the end. But I still wonder why they didn't know more about each other, given that they spent all that time together. I've sort of mixed up my screen. I've mixed up my order. I should have ordered the pages as well as the questions lesson for the next time. Okay, so Ross Queen. Alma saw the move to Lark House, I've sort of already talked about this, as a penance for the vanity and materialism she could afford in her former life by reducing or giving away frivolous possessions and only keeping photos, diaries and letters. If you had to do the same, what would you donate, throw away and keep? Ooh. And then Kathy stated that however old one is, we need a goal in our lives, page 67. What is your current life goal and how has it changed over the years? Do you think Alma and Ichimi's relationship would have survived if they'd come out in the later years when society was more accepting of interracial couples, or was the secrecy part of the thrill? I've thought about that quite a bit, and I wonder if they were too different. I mean, Ichimi was such a humble guy, and I do think that that's why once he died, Alma went to Lark House, that she got rid of everything and she realized that she had lost a life with somebody because she valued these things more than a person. And I think it wasn't until that point in her life that she could see the folly in that. And that's why I think she wanted to live as he did and understand, and maybe even see for herself. I don't know. I think maybe see for herself if she could have been happy. Maybe it was kind of torture for herself, like a punishment, and to see like, oh, I could have done this years ago and I would have been happy, and look at you now, you've lost the love of your life and Nathaniel's gone, and you sort of, whether or not she thinks she ruined his life, I mean, I don't think she does, but maybe on some level. But yeah, it's interesting. But I wonder if they would have been able to be together, if they could have been happy. I mean, it's interesting. Those are the kind of things that I almost feel like there's two different books in this book, and that I wanted them to be separated and explored more deeply. Instead of, it felt like I was getting brushstrokes of this, like Irina, and brushstrokes of sort of parts of Alma's life. And what I really wanted is to like get more in depth of both. But let's what else was however old one is, we need a goal in life. And what would I keep? Oh God, well, this year I think has been a big lesson in, you know, how much stuff do we need, especially having spent so much time in this place, my apartment. I have a lot of stuff and I don't need a lot of stuff. And I think a lot of people have had that realization this year. And I think it's good for all of us to realize that we don't need as much as we think we do. And, you know, we're sort of in this society where we're sort of conditioned to believe that our happiness comes from the things we consume, and when really it doesn't. You know, I think an access to a lovely place to walk in the country is much more valuable than, you know, some of the crap toys, you know, toys as in whatever stuff you have in your house. But yeah, I think this year has been a big eye-opener in terms of things. But what would I keep? If I had to throw away things, I mean, I would keep the people I love. I don't know. You know, obviously some clothes just wear. No, but I think well, it's photos is a weird thing, because I've realized that I don't really have photos anymore. We all have photos on our phone, and it drives me crazy that I don't have physical photos anymore. And I've lived in so many places that I've lost so many of my photos, and some of them are in storage and some of them are in somewhere else. And I miss those. I think one of the things I'm going to try and do is print out photos more and have actual photo albums. So you actually will go and look at them once in a while. Excuse me, that's my ramen and my beer. But also current goal in life. I think this year has changed my perspective on a lot of things. I mean, this idea that you know, in the blink of an eye, your life can change. And I've been very lucky this year that, my family's all safe. No one's been sick. But the things that really, stir my soul, like travel and things like that, were really taken away. And it's like, okay, well, what can you do if you don't have that stuff? And it's about finding things locally and finding places that give you as much pleasure. And like going for a walk today when the sun was finally out, woo, and there was walk down by the river, and it's just like the flowers are starting to come out and daffodils are starting to bloom, and those things just like make you so happy. And you're like, oh, like you don't need sometimes all these grand gestures or great expensive things to go and just feel really happy. It's like you just have to appreciate what's on your doorstep, I think, a little bit. What else have we got? So this was interesting. We talk about, I sort of mentioned this a little bit in the beginning. This is from Angie M NYC. She said, when we hear the words discrimination or privilege, most people think of racism, sexism, or classism. One type of discrimination that is often overlooked is ageism. Society often tends to discriminate against the elderly because of their functional limitations or mental deficits. Their stories and past are forgotten, and they are treated rather childlike in many ways because of their increased needs. What do you think the topic of ageism, why do you think the topic of ageism is often overlooked and not discussed more openly? Have you noticed any trends of ageism among your loved ones or in local community? I mean, this is one of the things that I definitely have thought a lot about over the years. And it's, we have flipped sort of, well, not everywhere, but I think in most sort of modern societies, we've sort of flipped this thing of, it used to be that your elders were the people who were the most wise and who would be the most revered, and we would keep living in these communities where they would be at the center of it. But as we've all now sort of embraced globalism and people travel more, and very rarely do we live in these sort of family communities or areas where it's like a lot of people move around. And so how often do we live with our older generations? And I do think it's really sad, and especially this year, you saw with the pandemic and so many elderly people being told to isolate and cocoon, but then we're basically forgotten about, and the loneliness that must have sort of caused. And I do think we have to really look at how we take care of our elderly, and just the way that the care homes were taken, were sort of just ignored in the beginning. I know in the UK there was so many sort of instances of care homes being run rife with COVID, and it's because of the way that people are, first of all, the way that the staff are paid in these places, and they're sent from one place to another, and so they get infected in one place and bring it to the other. And it's just like, surely we should value our elderly and the people who take care of them more than this. Why are people paid so little to take care of people who've given us their entire lives and birthed us and birthed our parents, and sort of sometimes fought for their countries, and given their lives to building the society the way it is, and then they're discarded. And I think it's really sad, and I think it's something that we need to change. I don't quite know how we do, but I think we have to. What is the background noise? It's like my office is a closet. Well, it's not really a closet, but that's where the boiler is. So unfortunately, oops, there in that black box is the boiler, and it's noisy. So that's the noise. I apologize. But anyway, is it International Women's Day? Somebody's saying Happy International Women's Day. Sort of been off social media, as a lot of you have noticed of late. I think it got all a little too crazy with politics and people just being so angry, and I just needed to take a holiday from it for a while, until the world gets a little bit nicer. So I didn't know it was International Women's Day, but Happy International Women's Day. And this is Catherine Toos, said, thanks for the choice of the book and for taking the time to discuss it with us. My pleasure. Do you think that fear was a driving force behind many of the decisions that caused so much pain and suffering? The Americans locked up the Japanese, Alma Nietzsche hiding the relationship, Irina keeping people at arm's length, Alma isolating herself from the other residents at Lark House. Also, I just adored the patience that Seth had with Irina. Do you think that a man would wait that long for a woman who's traumatized in real life? Thanks again, Catherine from Australia. Hi, Catherine from Australia. Well, I think it was a bit weird. I don't know. I mean, yes, I guess it's sweet, right, that he was so patient, but I don't know. I just had such a strange time with that. It didn't feel like an organic. But maybe that's what she needed. She needed somebody to just be like, no, you're going to do this. I'm the person you're going to be with, and you're going to be with me, and I'm just going to wait until you've decided. Do I think a man would do that in real life? I mean, there are some very good men out there, so possibly. But the question about fear, I do think so. I mean, fear is one of the things that, I mean, look at the state of the world now. So much of that is driven by fear. And people's fear of the other. It's the most crazy thing, and I don't know why there's so much fear, and I think it's because people aren't taught from a young age enough about love and compassion and empathy. And I think those three things are like the antithesis of fear. And it's this kind of, people being blocked or people being scared. And when you've had to survive, I mean, I think that in the terms of Irina, she had a genuine reason to be full of fear. The people that were supposed to look after her the most completely destroyed her. And I can't imagine anyone would easily get over something like that, or would be able to quickly rebound after something like that would happen. So I understand where it all comes from with everyone. Alma and Ichi, I mean, for Ichi, I don't think he would have ever hidden the relationship if Alma hadn't asked him to. That's the other thing. I'm not sure that Ichi was ever coming from a place of fear. I think that he was somebody that had a lot of peace within himself. But then I also wonder about why, would he be the type of person then to have an affair? That was the other thing. Rings, yes, I knew somebody was going to comment on that. I forgot to take my costume rings off on Friday, and I was so afraid that I would take them off here and forget to bring them in with me tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. and that I would I would be in trouble with my costumer. So I'm still wearing my costume rings. So yes, very observant. But okay, so what else? But yeah, I think fear is one of the big things that drive a lot of the story in this book, actually. So, God, I've been yapping a long time. Let's go to another question. Sorry, I'm trying to realize what I was... how far can love for someone go? Do you think Alma really loved Ichimi if she was unwilling to give up her lifestyle and adapt to Japanese community when she found out she was pregnant, as she chose her own environment over Ichimi? Do you think about the similarities between Alma and Nathaniel both having... What do you think about the similarities between Alma and Nathaniel both having forbidden loves? I realise I don't have as much stuff about Irina in here and Seth, and I loved Irina's story. This is 1318. Go back to her for a second. I'm so sorry. I don't know why the boiler's like going constantly. I didn't realise it was that loud as well. Apologise. Oh, this is one of the things that I don't want to end on a negative note, but I sort of like, this is sort of, I couldn't grapple with these sort of explanations. You know, there was a couple of these. It was like a massive turning point in a character's life, and it was sort of just explained away. And this is the sort of right after Irina realizes that when Kristen gives her the letters from Alma, and she said, Irina took it as a posthumous message from Alma, her way of showing how much she loved and trusted her. At that moment, she could feel something in her chest shattering like a clay vessel, while her heart swelled with profound gratitude. Faced with such a proof of friendship, she realised how deeply cherished she was, as she had been during her early childhood. The monsters of her past were beginning to recede, and her stepfather's videos, which had exerted such frightening power over her, were somehow reduced to their true dimensions. They seemed like bleak carcasses fed on by anonymous scavengers without identity or soul, now powerless. My God, Kristen, she said. Just imagine, I've lived half my life fearing something that isn't real. And there's stuff in this that I agree with, but there's also like... I mean, I do think when you understand love and feel real love, it can combat a lot, and you can understand then how to open yourself up and be more accepting to other love. But it's this thing of like, I've lived half my life fearing something that isn't real. I mean, that's not necessarily true. It was a very real thing she went through. And what she's fearing is not nothing, but I don't know. It's sort of just, I don't know. I feel like that's a bad way to end this, but I just was very confused, I think, by this book at times. I mean, I wanted to read more. I wanted to know more. I wanted her to go more in depth with some of these characters and relationships. And it was strange because I felt like there was so much story, but yet sometimes I felt like I was just being told this happens, then this happens, then this happens. And like these huge moments just explained away in the blink of an eye. And you know, I like it to get nitty and gritty. But let's go to some comments from you guys, and then it's almost time is up. Let's see. A lot of people talking about ageism. Ageism is so closely tied to capitalism and individualism. People see elderly as useless because they can't contribute economically, which is very sad. Oh, tomorrow is International Women's Day. Maybe that was somebody in Australia saying that. And oh, it's 1 year anniversary of CB Book Club. I did not realize that either because I'm useless, but yay. I know we should talk about Irina more. We should have. And I feel like we brushed over. For some reason, there was more questions about Alma and Ichimi. Let me see. I think right, so, I'm 74 and I've not been out for a year. Discovering you in Outlander saved my sanity. Thank you so much for the wonderful book suggestions. It's easy to get into a rut with your choices. Well, hi, H.A. Watson 66. I hope you're feeling safe and that you can get out and about very soon. And people are like, oh my God, Claire Spring. I know. One day it would be great to talk about the two rings. What more could be said about them? I will save this live if I don't mess it up. Somebody saying our computer's next to my furnace, so I don't really mind your boiler noise. Thank you. Someone else saying, you say sorry so much, you must be Canadian. Us Irish people do it too. How did you feel about them having an affair? I didn't care for that part because they should have been open about it, in my opinion. Yeah, it sort of wasn't as romantic as, I don't really believe that affairs are romantic. I think they're kind of sleazy. Not sleazy, but you know what I mean? It's kind of like there's other people that would be really hurt, that you're really hurting, I think. Anyway. Someone else. Trying to thank you for your discussion. Talk about the Tijuana chapter. Oh man, I know I've sort of forgot to talk about that. We've 3 minutes left. That's also a really tough chapter. But yeah, I don't know what to say right now on it without it rushing it, and I feel like it deserves a bigger conversation than that. I too wanted to know more about Irina's story. That's KJS or KJ Schlutz 10. I'm a second generation of a Holocaust survivor, and I can tell you that there is a way to live a full life in love if you want to talk to a survivor to understand where the strength comes from. Well, somebody's asking when Belfast is coming out. I believe maybe the fall, I think. The live can be more than an hour. Well, I got to go to bed. As I said, I'm up very early in the morning and I still have some more lines to learn. So with that, thank you very much, everyone, for joining. I don't have my other book, but I've already posted the picture, Conundrum, by Jan Morris. Very excited about this book. I've already started reading it and I love it. And I really appreciate you guys being here. I appreciate your patience with me. I know it's been a long time since the last one. It's just coming back to work was a complete, when you haven't been working schedule for so long and then you're back to work, it was just like, oh my God, what's happened? And right in the depths of winter in Scotland, it's been quite tough few months, but it's been good. And and I'll see you. I'm going to do this next month, try and get back on schedule. So I really appreciate it. And I just, Donna, pair 14 next month, back on schedule. All right, everyone, thank you so much. And I'll try and remember how to turn this off without looking like a fool. Is it this button? Right.